The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Phạm Bình Minh, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Vietnam.
Mr. President, I wish to congratulate Mr. Disinani Muhammad Bande on his election as President of the 74th section of the United Nations General Assembly. I firmly believe that you will skillfully lead our sections to success. May I express my appreciations to Her Excellency Madame Maria Fernanda Epizona Graces, President of the 73rd Sections, for her important contribution to the work of the General Assembly, as well as to Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his work and dedication over the past year. Mr. President, 8 years ago, the Second World War erupted and became the deadliest chapter in the history of mankind. This global conflict took the lives of tens of millions, destroyed economies and societies. It witnessed horrendous crimes and the emergence of new weapons and means of warfare with unparalleled destructive power. By the close of this chapter, nations have come to realize the importance of a collective security system based on multilateral cooperation and international law as the foundations of a post-war global order. This has proven to be a wise choice. For the past 75 years, multilateralism with the United Nations at its heart has become indispensable. Multilateral institutions provide the forums for states to deliberate and establish common policies in all aspects of global governance, from overarching themes of peace, security, economy, trade, development, and human rights, to specialized areas of cooperation in maritime, aviation, postal, and telecommunication. They also incubate ideas, set standards and strategies to coordinate states' efforts to address traditional and non-traditional security challenges and improve the quality of life. Mr. President, we are at the threshold of the third decade of the 21st century. We can pride ourselves in a world of peace, cooperation, and development. We can rejoice at the achievement of peace efforts in various regions, from Mali to Liberia, South Sudan to Côte d'Ivoire. Vietnam welcomes all efforts to settle disputes by dialogue and peaceful means, including the dialogue process between Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the United States. We have also seen significant achievements in global development. Hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty. Universalization of primary education has been achieved in many nations. Maternal and child mortality rates have been considerably reduced. Together, we have established important strategies and frameworks for global development efforts, such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing for Development, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Yet, multilateralism is facing acute challenges. It is alarming that narrowly interpreted national interests are chosen over common values. Big power politics, coercion, competitions, and confrontation are favored over cooperation, dialogue, and respect for international law. The consequential reductions in political commitment and resources has impacted the efficiency and effectiveness of multilateral cooperation. This is all happening while the challenges we are facing is greater in magnitude and more complex in nature. No nation is immune to the immediate and long-term impacts of climate change, environmental degradation, or pandemics. Conflicts are protracted in many areas, especially in the Middle East and Africa, while the risks of conflicts loom large in other regions. Battlegrounds are no longer confined within designated war zones, but have spread to densely populated cities and villages. The global arms control and non-proliferation regime is becoming more fragile. The development of science and technology have brought about new means and methods of warfare. Global military spending is at its highest. And in the words of the Secretary General, the world is on the verge of a new Cold War. In this context, we welcome the timely theme set by Mr. President for this section, galvanizing multilateral efforts for poverty eradication, quality education, climate action, and inclusion. Mr. President, multilateral cooperation has a special place in Vietnam's foreign policy. Our history of reform, development, and international integration are closely associated with our participation into global and regional multilateral institutions. The assistance of the UN and other international organizations helped Vietnam rebuild our country after decades of war. Solid policy and legal frameworks have allowed Vietnam to further advance integration and socio-economic development and better implement global development goals. The UN and multilateral forum have provided Vietnam with important political and legal platforms to expand our cooperation with nations over the world. Vietnam has been an active and constructive partner in multilateral processes. We are working with other ASEAN member states to enhance ASEAN's centrality in promoting peace, security, and prosperity in Southeast Asia and Asia-Pacific region. In the United Nations, members of Vietnam's People's Army have joined the organization's peacekeeping operations. Our diplomats and experts have contributed substantively to the development of UN agendas and policies on sustainable development, oceans and seas, human rights, amongst others. Vietnam is strongly committed to the full implementations of the 2030 Agenda and Paris Agreement, and in particular is taking concrete steps to end single-use plastics by 2025. Vietnam is honored to have been elected non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. On behalf of the government and people of Vietnam, I extend to you our most sincere gratitude for once more again entrusting us with this important position. As a member of the Council, Vietnam will do our level best to work with the broader UN membership toward the ultimate goals of sustainable peace and development. Given today's doubting challenges, it is critical that we all work to revitalize multilateralism and strengthen the United Nations. And I would like to offer some thoughts on how that can be achieved. First, we must all reaffirm the fundamental importance of international law and the United Nations Charter in international relations and multilateral cooperation. International law is the foundation of equal relations among states. Our actions must be in line with and guided by respect for international law. Vietnam believes that respect for international law is the most effective measure to prevent conflicts and to seek sustainable solutions for disputes. We support all efforts to settle disputes by peaceful means in accordance with the UN Charter and international law, including negotiation, conciliation, and judicial settlement. We call for the immediate lifting of the unilateral embargoes against Cuba, contrary to international law. We urge relevant parties in the South China Sea to respect international law, especially the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea 1982, appropriately referred to as the constitutions for the oceans. Linking the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, the South China Sea is strategically important to peace, security, and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. Efforts by relevant states have yielded positive outcomes in settling differences and disputes. However, Vietnam has on many occasions voiced its concerns over the recent complicated developments in the South China Sea, including serious incidents that infringe upon Vietnam's sovereign rights and jurisdiction in our maritime zones as defined by UNCLOS. Relevant states should exercise self-restraint and refrain from conducting unilateral acts which may complicate or escalate tensions at sea and settle disputes by peaceful means in accordance with international law, including the UNCLOS. Secondly, it is important to enhance the synergies between the global and the regional. Global actions can only be effective if adapted to the particular historical, socioeconomic, political, cultural, and geographical conditions of each region and state. Regional organizations could play a critical role in support of the UN efforts. Vietnam welcomes the cooperation between the United Nations, especially the UNSC, with the African Union, the European Union, and the League of Arab States in addressing security challenges in Africa and the Middle East. In the Southeast Asia region, ASEAN is a regional institution that is based upon shared commitment and collective responsibility in enhancing regional peace, security, and prosperity. After more than 50 years, ASEAN has become an embodiment of the visions of regional governments and peoples of a politically, economically, and socially connected community. ASEAN has proved its centrality in the regional rules-based security architecture and provided a forum for regional and other states to cooperate for sustainable development, peace, and stability in the region and the world. In 2020, Vietnam assumes the chairmanships of ASEAN as we also serve on the Security Council. We will endeavor to enhance the cooperation and complementarity between the Council and the regional organizations, particularly in conflict prevention and sustainable peace efforts. Thirdly, multilateral efforts need to put people at heart. Lasting peace is the prerequisite for sustainable development and can only be achieved when the basic safety and living conditions of the people are ensured. Vietnam deplores attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructures critical for the survival of civilians. We support and commit to advance the UN agendas on women, peace and stability, children, and armed conflicts. Vietnam has endorsed the Safe School Declaration to join efforts to protect the rights of children to education under all circumstances. We will promote post-conflict reconstruction efforts, particularly My Action, for the safety of people and socio-economic recovery and development of states. Fourthly, multilateral institutions must be reformed to meet new requirements and better serve the interests of member states, especially developing states in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Vietnam welcomes efforts to reform the UN development system to enhance its efficiency and effectiveness. We underline the need to increase government ownership and to garner the contributions of non-governmental organizations, other stakeholders, and communities. Vietnam will work with member states to actively contribute to reforming Security Council's working methods to enhance transparency, democracy, and effectiveness. Finally, Mr. President, political commitment of world leaders is indispensable to any efforts to revitalize multilateralism, the UN or multilateral system can only be empowered if each country commits the greater good of international community instead of narrowly defined interests, and to invest their will and resources. Only when such commitment is guaranteed can we enter a new, brighter chapter in the history of mankind, a chapter of cooperation and dialogue, a chapter of sustainable peace and development. I thank you for your attention.
Doy las gracias.
I wish to thank His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Vietnam.